A thrift store is a sanctuary of second chances where forgotten items get a new life. But for some shoppers, it's not a treasure hunt. It's a battlefield for their baffling expectations. We've collected the 55 most absurd and genuinely unhinged complaints ever lodged in the wild world of secondhand shopping. 1. A woman returned a porcelain doll with wide, glassy eyes, claiming it was emotionally draining to have in her house. She wasn't saying it was haunted in a scary way. Rather, she insisted the doll possessed a deep, lingering aura of mild disappointment. She said its presence made her feel a constant, low-grade sadness, as if it were silently judging her for not living up to her potential. Do you believe inanimate objects can hold on to the energy of their previous owners? 2. Some people buy vintage for the charm. Others apparently buy it to fact-check history against modern reality. A young man bought a dusty globe from the 1960s for $2, only to march back in the next day like a disgruntled history professor. He had a printed list of all the countries on the globe that no longer exist, accusing the store of selling dangerous geopolitical misinformation. He demanded a refund and an apology for briefly confusing his sense of world geography. 3. One customer's complaint was a complete reversal of the usual chaos theory of thrift stores. She was furious because the store was too clean and organized. She argued that the neatly arranged racks and clearly labeled sections had ruined the thrill of the hunt. She missed the joy of digging through messy bins to unearth a hidden gem and accused the management of sanitizing the authentic thrifting experience with their relentless efficiency. 4. What's the most ridiculous reason you've ever heard for returning something? I think this one might take the cake. A woman returned a pair of perfectly good hiking boots because they gave her a blister. Not because of the size, but because, and I quote, "the previous owner's foot energy was incompatible with her own." She called it a negative podiatric aura and insisted on a refund plus store credit for the sage she'd now have to buy to spiritually cleanse her feet. 5. A cuckoo clock is supposed to be charming, a little piece of whimsical clockwork. Well, one customer found his to be a source of constant psychological torment. He complained that the little wooden bird wasn't just chirping the hour, it was doing so with a distinctly judgmental tone. He was convinced the bird's chirps were sarcastic and were mocking his life choices. He didn't want a refund. He wanted to exchange it for a clock with a more supportive and affirming bird. 6. You think you've heard it all working retail? Then you get a formal, handwritten complaint letter. One man was so incensed by the book section that he felt compelled to put his grievances on paper. His charge? Acts of literary barbarism. The store had organized the books by the color of their spines. He detailed his 45-minute ordeal of trying to find Moby Dick, not in fiction, but in the white and off-white section. Because God forbid a classic novel has to sit next to a beige romance paperback. 7. Look, we all know about thrift store smell. It's a signature blend of mothballs, old paper, and mystery. But one woman claimed it was less of a smell and more of a spiritual attachment. She insisted the scent from a flannel shirt she bought had aggressively haunted her car's upholstery, giving her secondhand dreams about someone else's grandpa. Her demand? For the store to pay for a full automotive detail to, essentially, exorcise the scent of Earl from her Honda. 8. Just before Christmas, a customer complained that the store's donated nativity scene was zoologically and historically irresponsible. He pointed out that one of the sheep was clearly a species from North America, and the donkey's ears were too short. He was most offended, however, by the plastic camel, which he insisted was an anatomically incorrect representation of the dromedaries found in the Middle East. He felt the store was promoting a factually inaccurate version of the Christmas story. 9. A man returned a 1,000-piece jigsaw puzzle of a coral reef because it was unreasonably hard and had caused significant marital strife. His main point of contention was the sheer amount of blue pieces for the ocean, which he argued was borderline irresponsible to sell without a specific warning. He wanted a refund for the puzzle and compensation for his wasted weekend. 10. Most complaints are about the buying experience. This one was about the supply chain. A well-dressed regular customer pulled the manager aside, not to complain about a price or a policy, but about the other customers. She was deeply concerned about the declining caliber of donated goods. She gestured at a rack of clothes with disdain, noting a rise in cheap, fast fashion brands. She felt the store had a responsibility to maintain a higher standard and suggested they implement a stricter donation acceptance policy to filter out people with questionable taste, essentially turning a community charity drop-off into an exclusive, curated boutique. 11. A woman tried to return a board game from the 1990s, complete with a faded, almost unreadable receipt she'd miraculously kept. Her justification was flawless in her mind. The box was still in its original shrink wrap, so it was technically brand new. When the manager pointed out their 14-day return policy, she became irate, arguing that the policy shouldn't apply if the item was never used. The best part? The game was a Trivial Pursuit edition where all the questions were about events from over 30 years ago. 12. You've heard of buyer's remorse, but have you heard of too good a deal remorse? A woman found a genuine designer handbag for $10. She bought it, authenticated it online, and then returned it, furious. Her logic was a beautiful pretzel of entitlement. The store clearly didn't know its value, and by selling it so cheap, they had devalued the entire brand, which made her feel like she was carrying a fake. She was genuinely angry that the store's pricing mistake had ruined the exclusive feeling of her bargain. 13. A man bought a brightly colored 14-pound bowling ball, not for bowling, but to use as a workout weight. He returned it, deeply disappointed with its performance as fitness equipment. His formal complaint stated that the ball lacked proper ergonomic grips for weightlifting, and that the 3 finger holes were a significant pinch hazard during abdominal crunches. He was genuinely upset that this specialized sporting item was so poorly designed for a purpose it was never intended for. 14. The irony of this next one is almost painful. A teenager bought a punk-style denim jacket, which was covered in band patches and had clearly intentional, fashionable rips and frays. She came back to complain that the jacket was damaged goods. She pointed to a frayed seam and a missing decorative button as if she'd uncovered a manufacturing defect in a jacket designed to look like it survived a rock concert and a mosh pit. 15. It's one thing to complain as a buyer, but it takes a special kind of audacity to complain as a donor. A woman who regularly donated her old things came in, not to shop, but to browse the results of her own charity. She found a rack with a collection of her late husband's neckties she had dropped off the week before. She was furious they were priced at $3 each, arguing it was a disrespectful valuation of her husband's professional life. She insisted he was a $5 tie man at least, and that the store was insulting his memory by underselling the items she had given them for free. 16. A woman returned a used washing machine, presenting the manager with a single faded sock in a sealed Ziploc bag, as if it were evidence in a federal case. She was horrified to have discovered it inside the drum. Her complaint wasn't just about cleanliness. It was a violation of her domestic sanctity. She demanded a refund for the machine and an apology for being forced to confront the intensely personal artifact of a total stranger. 17. For most people, finding a forgotten dollar bill in the pocket of a newly purchased pair of jeans is a small, unexpected victory. Not for this customer. He returned to the store, not to share his good fortune, but to file a complaint. He was genuinely underwhelmed by his find. He argued that based on statistical probability and the law of averages, a pair of pants that nice should have contained at least a $5 bill. He felt he had been shortchanged by fate, and that the store should compensate him for the difference between what he found and what he felt he deserved to find. 18. During the holidays, a customer brought a bizarre assortment of items to the checkout: a single bowling ball, a dusty floor lamp, and a stack of old magazines. After paying, she was absolutely floored when the cashier informed her they did not offer complimentary gift wrapping. She stared in disbelief, claiming this ruined the entire spirit of giving and that it was a basic retail courtesy, regardless of whether you're selling luxury watches or someone's discarded bowling ball. 19. A woman presented a single, heavily chewed leather shoe at the return counter, explaining that her dog had eaten its mate. She argued that the shoe was made of a leather that was irresponsibly delicious-smelling to canines, and that the store had a duty to put warning labels on items that were not pet-proof. The fault, in her eyes, lay not with her poorly trained dog, but with the irresistible, apparently gourmet shoe. 20. You'd think a kitchen appliance that literally has its function printed on it would be straightforward. Apparently not. A woman returned a bread maker, absolutely furious. Her complaint? It was a terrible slow cooker. She'd tried to make chili in it, and the kneading paddle had shredded all the ground beef, and the heat settings were all wrong. She demanded a refund, blaming the store for selling a deceptively shaped cooking device that ruined her dinner party. 21. After Halloween, a man returned a wizard costume. It wasn't torn, but it smelled faintly of party fog and cheap beer. His complaint wasn't about the condition, but about the lingering celebratory aura attached to it. He claimed the costume's joyful energy was clashing with his own naturally somber and introspective lifestyle, and he needed something with a more neutral or even melancholic history. He was, in essence, complaining that the costume had been used for its intended purpose, having fun. 22. A man tried to buy the bright red fire extinguisher mounted on the wall. When the employee explained it was mandatory safety equipment and not for sale, the man became indignant. He argued that if an item is physically inside the store, it should be available for purchase, especially since it perfectly matched the accent colors in his kitchen. He filed a complaint against the store for hoarding aesthetically pleasing safety equipment and discriminating against customers with a flair for interior design. 23. A customer returned an old Casio keyboard from the 80s, his eyes looking haunted. He claimed the pre-programmed demo song, a tinny, relentlessly upbeat synth-pop track, was a form of psychological warfare. He insisted the tune had become an inescapable earworm, causing him auditory distress and disrupting his sleep. He demanded a refund and suggested the store remove all instruments that could potentially inflict such musical trauma on future customers. 24. It's a well-known fact that clothes look different on a mannequin than they do on a real person. One woman took this fact as a personal betrayal. She bought a dress that looked stunning on a plastic display figure. She returned it the next day, not because the dress was flawed, but because it didn't look as good on her. Her complaint was aimed directly at the mannequin, which she claimed had deceived her with its perfect, unrealistic physique. She accused the store of false advertising via plastic models and insisted they use mannequins with more average body types to avoid getting people's hopes up. 25. Under the store's cool, humming fluorescent lights, a lamp's shade looked like a lovely neutral beige. At home, under her warm, incandescent bulbs, the woman who bought it was horrified. The shade had transformed into what she called a distinctly and offensively taupe. She returned it, accusing the store of deliberate color manipulation through its lighting choices, suggesting it was a calculated conspiracy to move undesirable beige merchandise. 26. One store had a regular who was a known reseller, a guy who would scan barcodes and check eBay comps in the aisles. One day, he confronted the manager, absolutely livid. The store had started pricing its vintage video games closer to their actual market value instead of a flat $3. He accused the manager of getting greedy and ruining it for everyone, arguing the store had a moral obligation to sell things cheap so people like him could make a profit. 27. A man bought a vintage blazer and later found a 30-year-old grocery list in an inner pocket. He didn't return the jacket. He returned the list. His complaint was that the piece of paper was torn at the bottom and therefore incomplete. He claimed he was now consumed with curiosity about what the original owner was planning to cook for dinner in 1993, and he accused the store of robbing him of crucial historical closure, as if they were now responsible for solving this 30-year-old culinary mystery. 28. A young man bought a t-shirt with a cool-looking phrase in Japanese kanji. He wore it to a party, proudly telling everyone it meant warrior of courage. That is, until someone who actually spoke Japanese informed him it translated to fresh and reasonably priced. He returned the shirt the next day, complaining that the store sold him an item that caused him deep social humiliation by making him look like a walking advertisement for a fish market. 29. A man returned to the store with a shopping cart, which he wheeled directly to the manager's office. His complaint wasn't about an item he had purchased, but about the cart itself. It had a squeaky wheel. He argued this wasn't a minor annoyance, but a critical strategic disadvantage. He claimed the relentless squeaking acted as a homing beacon for rival shoppers, broadcasting his location and alerting them to prime hunting grounds he had discovered. He demanded the store implement a stealth cart maintenance program to ensure all shoppers could hunt for bargains in silence. 30. This next one is a beautiful, tragic tale from the generation gap. A college student furiously returned a VCR, claiming it was broken. Why? It refused to play her brand new Blu-ray disc. After the manager gently explained the concepts of formats and VHS tapes, she accused the store of deceptive advertising, arguing the tape slot was misleadingly shaped. She even suggested they put a warning label on old tech for people not born in the technological dark ages. 31. A woman stormed out of the dressing room clutching a blouse she hadn't bought. She didn't complain about the fit or the price, she complained about the mirror. She was convinced it was a distorted carnival mirror that was optically slanderous. She insisted its subtle warping was a deliberate sales tactic designed to make people feel bad about themselves so they'd buy more clothes out of desperation. She demanded they replace it with one that was certified for accuracy. 32. A customer returned a 1970s Betty Crocker cookbook, its pages now stained with what looked like a culinary crime scene. He had attempted a Jell-O salad recipe from the book, which resulted in a gelatinous, inedible nightmare. He blamed the outdated and dangerous recipe for ruining his dinner party and demanded a refund for the book, plus compensation for the ingredients he wasted. What's the single worst, most disastrous recipe you've ever tried to follow from an old cookbook? 33. The music in a thrift store is usually a forgettable mix of 80s soft rock. For one man, it was a weapon of commercial sabotage. He complained to the manager that a particularly slow, soul-crushing ballad had killed his shopping momentum. He claimed the hypnotic, depressing tune made him stop and reflect on the fleeting nature of material possessions, causing him to put back several items he was about to buy. He argued the store's playlist was actively anti-capitalist. 34. A young woman bought a thick vinyl-bound photo album from the 1980s, expecting a fascinating glimpse into a stranger's life. She returned it the next day, bored out of her mind. Her complaint was that the family depicted in the photos was unbelievably dull. She cited a disappointing lack of drama or interesting vacations, and a parade of bad haircuts and beige living rooms. She wanted her money back because the life story she purchased was, in her opinion, completely devoid of entertainment value. 35. Sometimes it's the little things. A woman returned a pristine ceramic vase, but her complaint wasn't about the vase. It was about the price tag. Specifically, the incredibly stubborn paper-based sticker that tears into a million tiny pieces when you try to remove it. She had spent 30 minutes scraping it off, a process which she claimed cost her significant emotional labor and minor manicure damage. She felt the store should use easily removable stickers or offer a discount for the cleanup effort. 36. A beautiful oak rocking chair was brought back, now streaked with peeling, cheap latex paint. The woman who returned it complained that the wood was too sealed and unreceptive to her artistic vision. She argued that the chair had stubbornly rejected the paint, and that the store should have sold her a piece of furniture that was more willing to cooperate with her DIY project, as if the chair had a personal vendetta against her chosen color palette. 37. In a shocking turn of events at a place that literally sells used items, a woman brought a vintage wedding dress to the manager, completely appalled. Her issue? The dress had, wait for it, been used before. I know, take a moment to process that. She was genuinely offended that this pre-owned garment didn't come with a notarized history of its previous owner and demanded a discount for the emotional labor of having to imagine someone else had a happy day in it first. 38. A man returned the complete DVD box set of a popular TV show from the early 2000s. The discs were in perfect condition. His complaint had nothing to do with the product itself, but with its content. He had spent the entire weekend binge-watching all 7 seasons, only to be, in his words, personally betrayed by the series finale. He argued that the store was complicit in distributing emotionally damaging media and demanded a full refund for the product, plus compensation for his wasted time and the narrative trauma he had endured. 39. A complaint was filed regarding the store's parking lot. A customer claimed that the distance from the furthest parking space to the front door was excessive and had completely sabotaged her bargain-hunting stamina. By the time she walked inside, she was already too tired to effectively hunt and gather. She suggested the store either provide a golf cart shuttle service or offer a long-distance walker discount to compensate for the pre-shopping fatigue. 40. A woman bought a vintage jacket, believing she'd found a rare, high-end designer piece from the 70s. After some research, she discovered it was actually a cheap, mass-market knockoff from that same era. She returned it, furious. Her complaint wasn't just that it was a fake, but that it was a vintage fake. She felt she had been duped by history itself, and was somehow more offended by a 50-year-old counterfeit than she would have been by a modern one. 41. Sometimes the perfect find isn't a victory, it's a trap. A pair of vintage jeans that fit flawlessly, a one-in-a-million holy grail find, were returned the very next day. The reason? Not a flaw, but their perfection. The shopper complained that the jeans were manipulatively flattering and had coerced her into an unplanned purchase through their sheer excellence. She was essentially demanding a refund because she lacked the self-control to walk away from a deal so good it felt like a personal attack on her budget. 42. A man bought a heavy vintage wool blanket, the kind that looks like it belongs in a rustic mountain cabin. He returned it because it was unethically coarse. His complaint wasn't just that it was scratchy, but that the texture was historically inaccurate for a blanket of its supposed era, claiming that weavers from that period would have used a softer wool. He was, in effect, fact-checking the tactile authenticity of a $30 blanket. 43. A lack of damage was the cause of one angry return. A beautiful vintage leather briefcase, its brass latches still gleaming, was brought back because it lacked the scuffs and worn corners that would give it character and an authentic patina of adventure. The customer was furious because he wanted to buy an item that looked like it had told stories, but instead, he got one that was historically sterile. He felt cheated out of the rugged, well-traveled persona he was trying to purchase. 44. The tragedy of the lonely saucer began when a customer bought a single, ornate piece of a set, clearly missing its teacup. A few days later, she returned it, not just furious, but on a mission. Her complaint? The matching teacup was nowhere to be found in the store. She argued that selling one without the other was like selling a car with only 3 wheels, and that the store had a moral obligation to maintain the integrity of a set they never actually possessed in the first place. 45. An employee reported a complaint from a man who was upset about the store's air conditioning. It wasn't that he was too cold, it was that the powerful AC was disrupting his hunting technique. He claimed the lack of heat and humidity was preventing dust motes from properly floating in the sunbeams that streamed through the windows. This, he argued, made it impossible for him to spot hidden, ethereal treasures in the air, thereby ruining his almost mystical shopping strategy. 46. A cat's total and utter indifference was the reason for one bizarre return. Its owner had bought a large, realistic-looking fake cactus as a safe alternative for her plant-chewing pet. The problem? The cat took one dismissive sniff of the fake and was utterly unimpressed, showing zero interest. The woman accused the store of selling a product that was insufficiently convincing on a feline sensory level and demanded a refund because it failed its primary mission: to be a believable decoy for a bored animal. 47. A complaint was lodged, not against an item or an employee, but against a sunbeam. A regular shopper pointed out a rack of vintage dresses placed near a large window. She argued that the constant, direct sunlight was causing uneven and premature aging of the garments. This, she claimed, created an inequitable two-tiered system on a single rack, where the dresses at the front were being sacrificed to UV radiation, while the ones in the back remained pristine. She demanded the store either install museum-grade UV-blocking film or implement a strict garment rotation schedule to ensure all dresses received equal and minimal sun exposure. 48. An apocalyptically loud alarm was the reason for returning an industrial-grade clock from the 1950s. The customer claimed the bell was less of a ring and more of a full-scale factory fire drill that didn't just wake him up. It launched him out of bed in a state of pure terror. He called it a health hazard that started his day with a full-body shock and a frantic search for a non-existent emergency, and insisted the store should have a warning label for items capable of causing cardiac-level awakenings. 49. 3 pieces of a beautiful antique wooden chair were brought to the counter by the man who had bought it whole just hours before. He'd ignored the clear, "as is for decorative use only" sign. His complaint wasn't about his mistake, but the sign itself. He argued the font used was a passive, non-threatening typeface and was not sufficiently alarming in its color scheme. He was literally blaming the store's graphic design choices for his own decision to ignore a clear, written warning. 50. A woman returned a set of perfectly good floral curtains, still in their slightly faded original packaging from the 90s. Her complaint had nothing to do with the curtains themselves, but with the picture on that packaging. The box showed the curtains hanging in a bright, spacious, sun-drenched room with elegant furniture. She was furious because when she hung them in her own, much smaller, carpeted apartment, the room did not magically transform to look like the picture on the box. She accused the store of engaging in deceptive lifestyle advertising, as if the secondhand curtains were supposed to come with the hardwood floors and perfect lighting shown in the photo. 51. A woman came face to face with a piece of her own past hanging on a rack. Her high school varsity jacket, donated years ago in a fit of decluttering. But this wasn't a moment of sweet nostalgia. She marched to the manager, not to buy it back, but to reclaim it. When told she'd have to purchase it like anyone else, she was completely incensed. Her complaint was that the store was holding her memories hostage and attempting to sell her own youth back to her. She genuinely believed her original donation was more like a long-term loan that she could revoke at any time. 52. The checkout counter, a place of final decisions, was the scene of one complaint about temptation itself. A customer argued that the placement of small, nostalgic items right by the register, in this case, a jar of old Pez dispensers, was a form of psychological warfare. She claimed the store was preying on shoppers who were in a weakened state of bargain-induced euphoria and demanded they move the impulse items to a less predatory location so she wouldn't be forced to buy them. 53. The failure of a dinner party was blamed squarely on a thrift store. A man had purchased a fondue pot from the 70s for a retro-themed gathering. He returned it, absolutely mortified, claiming its laughably inadequate capacity created a social bottleneck and starved his guests of cheese, ultimately ruining the evening. He wasn't just asking for a refund for the pot. He wanted compensation for the profound social humiliation he endured because of the second-hand party appliance. 54. For many, the joy of thrifting is in the dig. For one customer, it was a labor rights issue. She filed a formal complaint about the large, unsorted bins of miscellaneous housewares. She described the act of rummaging through them as an ergonomic nightmare and unpaid physical labor. She genuinely suggested that employees should pre-sift the bins and display only the A-tier discoveries on a shelf for a more civilized and efficient shopping experience. 55. A generous donation turned into a source of pure outrage. A woman who had donated a beautiful antique ceramic vase weeks earlier spotted it during a shopping trip. Her cherished family heirloom wasn't on a shelf for sale. It was on the floor, being used as a doorstop to prop open the stockroom door. She was absolutely incandescent with rage, not about money, but about the deeply undignified new life her treasured possession had been forced into. She demanded the store give her vase the respect and prominent placement it deserved. Proof that the line between a bargain and a battle is thinner than you think. But here's the real question. After hearing these stories, what is the single most ridiculous, absurd, or entitled complaint you have ever personally witnessed or heard about in real life? If you enjoyed this madness, hit like and subscribe for more.